Jesus, you are our priceless treasure. You are something that we could never obtain on our own, and yet you come and you give all of yourself to us so that we can be yours. Guide us in this time together. Give us your heart and your mind to hear and to know all that you give to us. We ask this in Jesus' name. I said at the beginning, we're in this series, we're talking about witnesses for Jesus. And if you haven't been with us, or you've missed a couple weeks, or it's been a long time since last Sunday, I understand that. A witness is someone who has experienced something, seen something, done something that maybe you haven't, and can give you a perspective on it. Or maybe it's something that you have done, but they give you a different perspective. They saw it from a different angle. So that's what a witness is. A witness is someone who's seen something and done something that maybe you haven't or maybe you haven't, and can give you a different perspective. We're talking about witnesses for Christ, those who have seen Christ work, done things, or know of God in a new way, especially those in the Bible, who can give us a new perspective on that. Let me give you a quick example. I've had the wonderful and great opportunity to go twice to China. China, if you don't know, is a large country. It's bigger than the U.S. It is massive. I'm always surprised when I get there what it's like. It's a completely different culture, completely different part of the world, completely different way of doing things, and it's exciting. It's very, very neat. They eat things that we normally don't eat. And I tell you that because a lot of times we think we've gone to a Chinese restaurant, and they call themselves like authentic Chinese. They're not. I don't care what they say. They can say they're authentic as much as they want. They're not, because I have never been to a Chinese restaurant here where I have seen dragon fruit on the menu. The dragon fruit is this really crazy looking thing. It kind of looks like a pear, and it's red, and it has things coming out. When you slice it open, it's white. It has like black speckles. It almost looks like poppy seeds in it. It is one of the lightest, sweetest fruits I've ever had. It's delicious, but I've never actually seen it in a Chinese restaurant here. Or I've never actually been to a Chinese restaurant here where the chicken is so fresh that it probably came off the back of a bicycle. And I say that because when you go there and you order a chicken, you don't just get like chicken wings or chicken nuggets. Like you get a whole chicken. And when I say a whole chicken, I mean you get skin, and you get the head, and you get the feet, and everything's on the plate. Because in that culture, it's important to know that you haven't been ripped off. And if you have the whole chicken there, you know you have not been ripped off. You're getting everything you paid for. And so it's fresh, it's good, and it's really strange when it's the chicken on the table with its head in it. And I've never sat down and ate where a huge Lazy Susan is there, and they put all the different dishes that you've ordered. I've eaten family style, and I know what that's like. But when you spin that and you start looking at things and you go, what is that? Somebody says, well, that's chicken feet. I'd never eaten chicken feet in a Chinese restaurant. I'm like, what's that? And they said, well, that's pig intestine soup. And I said, I've never eaten pig intestine soup. And I don't ever want to again. It's a different culture. It's a different world. And it's a beautiful, beautiful country. It really is. It's a lot of our misconceptions about China come from 50 years ago, 60 years ago, what we knew about China then, and communism and what they're doing. Some of it is still true. Some of it's not. I can talk to you about China for hours, and we don't really have time for that. So let me tell you a little bit about our experience and my experience in China. We go over and we visit our friends Hilda and Lily. This is Hilda. Hilda and Lily are Chinese, and they're Christians. They speak very fluent English. Hilda is a very devout Christian, which is some people always find surprising when I tell them that, because we have this conception that to be Chinese, you cannot be Christian. You'll be killed for it. Well, that's not necessarily true. You can be Christian and be Chinese. It's okay. You can't stand on the street corner and proclaim the gospel. It has to be within relationships in different ways. But you can be. And Hilda's a very, very strong Christian. And we go over and we teach English as a second language, and we get a chance to interact with the Chinese people and talk to them. And Hilda serves as my translator when I go. She is a very, very fluent in English and can translate extremely well. We have wonderful conversations and lots of fun. I can actually tell you this conversation was all about predestination. She asked about it, so we talked about it. It was a lot of fun at dinner one night. But there is, the major religion in China is Buddhism and ancestor worship. And they took us to several different Buddhist temples. And I can tell you, I've never been in a place that's felt more depressing. Because if you know anything about Buddhism and you know anything about ancestor worship, what they do is they have stores, huge storefronts, where you can buy things like fake money and fake clothing and fake food. And you take it to a temple like this and you burn it and offer it to the ancestors to appease them, to make them happy. And there's people doing this all the time. And there's just this sadness that's over everything. Sorry, something caught my throat. I think I'm okay. Swallow a few times to get my throat not dry. There is this pervading sadness that's over the temples. And there's people, they're not joyful, they're not happy. You can tell they're looking for something. You can tell they're looking for hope. They're looking for something to hold on to, something that will give them assurance, and yet they can't find it. Because everything is sad. But then we had the opportunity to go to several churches, and this one always surprised people. There are churches in China. Some are smaller than even this. Maybe 40, 50, 60 people could sit. And they worship God. They're there and they celebrate. And Christianity is one of the largest growing religions in China. And so there's these little churches, and they worship together. They're not house churches, they're public churches that people can go. And some of them even are bigger than what we have here. I mean, hundreds of people can come and sit in the church and worship God. And there's the altar and the baptismal font, and they're there. And some of them even have PowerPoint. They put everything up on the screens, and they do it just like we do here. It's amazing. And then there's places where it's out in the country, and it's rural, and it's barn. They call it Barn Church, which is probably my favorite church. It's really kind of cool. Out in the middle of this countryside is a barn that they have converted into a church place of worship. And people gather, and they come. They walk for miles. They want to be in worship. They wanted to be there. Because they knew that there was hope there. They knew there was something there they couldn't get anywhere else. And so they would come. And we had the opportunity to go and to worship with them. And so we didn't understand much of what was going on. They had electric pianos, they had organ, they had guitars, and they sang, and it was beautiful, and it was wonderful. And they asked us to bring greetings, so I got to get up and bring greetings and a blessing from the Church in America to them, and to really experience. Well, one of the things that was very different about the worship in ours is their prayer. They really, they strongly believe in the power of prayer. Probably more than anyone I've ever met. When we got done, they said, hey, would you mind praying with some people? I said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. There was a line from me at the front to probably the back. People that just wanted to be prayed for. And so there were people that, a lot of mothers came up praying for wives for their sons. That's important, that culture. It's important to be married and continue the family name. And there was a lot of people coming and asking for prayers for healing and prayers for finances and prayers for all sorts of things. But I'll never forget, there was this mother who came up with a small boy. And the boy had a heart murmur, he had a heart defect, he had some other issues going on. He was supposed to be going in for surgery the next day. And the mother said, will you pray for son? And Hilda was there, this was all Chinese, so Hilda was standing next to me, and she's translating for her and then translating back, and so there's a beautiful moment of all four of us standing there praying, and I prayed, and I said, God, we're praying for this young boy, we're praying that you would heal him. We know that you're a powerful God, you're an amazing God, you do miracles all the time, you heal people all the time, and we believe that you can do it now, we ask you for a miracle. That you heal this young boy. But if you don't want to do it that way, that's fine, use doctors and nurses and other things. And give the family assurance that you're with them, that you're watching them, that you're guiding them. Because going to the hospital is scary anyway. When you go to the hospital in a country where sometimes they're not always the best, it's even scary. And they walked away and said, okay, that's fine. We pray for everyone else down the road. And the next day was our off day. We were going to an underground cave, and as we were driving there, one of the people who was with us got a phone call. And, we had no clue what was going on, because it's all in Chinese. So we kept our conversation going, and eventually that ended, and she talked to Hilda, and Hilda said to me, "Do you remember that young boy we prayed for yesterday, that the heart issue?" I said, "Yeah, I remember." He said, "Well, they just called and the surgery's canceled." I said, "Oh, no, what happened? What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing's wrong. Went into the pre-op, and they couldn't find the heart issue. Fever broke. He's perfectly fine. They sent him home. They can't cancel the surgery because they can't find anything wrong. The boy's happy and joyous, and he's like any little child." And I remember writing that card thinking, you used me. I don't know why you did or how you did, but you used me to help in this situation. And to do something, even though I felt powerless and I felt like I really couldn't do much. Talking witnesses, people who can do things that we can't do. We started 2 weeks ago looking at the Magi, those visitors who came to visit Jesus right after he was born. And they were seeking. We asked the question, who are you seeking? Are you seeking things that are outside of God, or are you seeking God first? Because God says, "Seek me first, and I'll add everything else to you." So we asked that question, what are you seeking? Hopefully you've been pondering that and changing things so you're seeking God in His ways. Last week we talked about John the Baptizer. And we asked the question, who's the most? Who do you think about the most? Do you think about yourself the most? Or do you think about others and God the most? Are you humble, thinking about the welfare of others and the good of others before yourself? Or are you thinking, how do I look out for number one? We asked you to think about that. Who do you think about the most? So hopefully you've done that this week. You've really thought about that because God says He thinks about you the most. That you're the most important person. He sent His Son to die for you. And that's amazing that God humbled Himself and had the Son born of a virgin for you. So He thinks of you more than He thinks of anything else. Today we're going to talk about another witness. Maybe you already picked about it. It's the St. Peter, apostle, disciple. Peter, one of Jesus' right-hand man, as it were. There was an inner circle of disciples. There were the 12 disciples, but there was really an inner circle. There was the 3. Peter, James, and John. Now, when they were called, there was actually 4, because Andrew was Peter's brother, and he was called. Now, if you remember the stories, and Peter shows up about right after the baptism, right after John the Baptizer baptizes Jesus, the disciples start being called. And Jesus calls John and James, and He calls Peter and Andrew and says, "Come follow me." And they were fishermen. They were Hebrew school washouts. They were disciple wannabes. They were ones that didn't make it. They may have gotten to the first round and gotten to the Torah, but they may not have gotten much farther after. And so they had taken up the family business, fishing. They were from Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, where a lot of fishing happens. And so they were fishermen. They were mending the nets, and Jesus comes and says, You follow me. Do what I do. Be what I am. Say what I say. And they dropped everything. Imagine that. Someone comes to you and says, "Follow me. Do what I do. Come where I come. Go where I go. Say what I say. Follow me." And you drop everything. House, home, family, the whole 9 yards, and leave. And this was a big deal because we know at least Peter was married. Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law of an illness. So Peter was married. He left his wife and family and everyone for 3 years at least. I mean, we know they went back to Galilee. They spent time there. They were all over the place. Sometimes I think probably Teresa feels that way about me when I'm hopping over to China or Nicaragua or wherever it might be. But God says, "Follow me." And so you go, right? So we commend him for that, but we have to remember that Peter's name wasn't originally Peter. His name was Simon. And when Jesus meets him, He gives him a nickname. He calls him Peter, Petros in the Greek, or Cephas in Aramaic, which means rock. He did the same thing with James and John, if you wanted to know. James and John He calls the Bomerang, which means sons of thunder, which means they didn't know how to keep their mouths shut. They talked too much. And we see that when we look at James and John. If you ever want to look at James and John, you'll see that they run their mouths constantly. They're always saying things, and He's like, really, stop. Just listen for a little bit. It's okay. Peter He calls rock. Cephas, rock. Petros, rock. Which rocks are good for some things, right? They're good for foundations, they're good for buildings, they're good for walls, they're good for some things. But for other things, they're not so good. So other things that are destructive, they can be thrown and break things. When dropped in water, they sink to the bottom very fast. As much as we want to commend Peter, we have to understand that he did some things that weren't so great, right? Peter was the guy who was the rock. He was supposed to be strong and solid. And when they see Jesus walking across the Sea of Galilee one night and they figure out it's him, Peter's the first one. Strong. Lord, let me come out to you. Jesus says, all right, come. And he starts to walk and he gets a few steps away from the boat and he starts to sink. Like rock. His faith failed. Jesus says, you have little faith. Peter, the guy who was supposed to be strong, who says to Jesus, we'll die for you. In the Garden of Gethsemane, cuts off the soldier's ear, trying to be strong, trying to be mighty, but yet he, just a few hours earlier, when Jesus says to him, you're going to betray me, he says, no, God, never, I will never betray you, I'll never walk away from you, I believe you, I'm strong, and right after that, he's in the Word. People start asking, well, you were with me, right? You sound like a Galilean. You were with Jesus. You're one of his disciples. And he says, no, not me, not me. 3 times he does that to the point where he starts calling down curses on himself, wishing he was dead, rather than admit that he was with Jesus. And the rooster crows, and Jesus sees him. And like a rock, Peter, who makes the great profession of faith, the one that we just read in Mark's Gospel, it's recorded in the other Gospels as well. Who do people say I am? You're Christ, the Son of the living God. Matthew's Gospel says, and Jesus looked at him and said, blessed are you, Simon Peter, because these things are not revealed to you by man, but God. And then he goes on to tell him everything that must happen to the Christ. And Peter, Simon Peter, the rock, says to Jesus, by no means, you can't die, you're the Christ. And that great reversal happens where he looks at him and says, get behind me. Not Simon, not Peter, it's Satan. Get behind me, Satan. You have in mind the things of man. Peter was, as we read in the epistle, an uneducated man. He was a fisherman. He seemed to be out of things. He wasn't this great, educated, powerful person. He was a fisherman. He was a day laborer. He was, for all intents and purposes, nothing. And this witness asks us today, who me? I can imagine as he's standing on the Sea of Galilee and Jesus says, you follow me. And he says, who? Me? Not me. He looks at each one and says, who? Me? God says, I called you. And you say, who? Me? And you start thinking about back on your life and all the times that God says to do something and you went, go. Tell them my love. I don't know. Go to the hospital and visit someone who's sick. Oh, God, that's... tell that person you work with Jesus' love. Oh, that's difficult. I don't know. Give someone a Bible that doesn't have one. Oh, that's difficult. I don't know. Me? Really me? He says, yeah, me. Because this is what happens to Peter. Remember, he falls. He falls hard. And after the resurrection, Jesus says to the women, he says, go and tell Peter and the other disciples. Go tell Peter. Make sure you specifically tell Peter and the other disciples that I'll meet them. And he does. He meets them on the sea, and they have a nice meal together. And after the meal, they're all sitting around together. And Jesus looks at Peter and says, Simon, not Peter, but Simon. Calls him by his given name, Simon, the son of John. Do you love me more than all these? Do you love me? Do you really love me, Simon? Not just Peter. I'm not gonna give you your nickname. I'm gonna give you a real name now. Simon, son of John. You denied me.
You walked away. You said I would die for you, and yet you walked away. Do you really love me? And Simon's response, John, it's really emphatic here. I actually should say Peter, not John. Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord. You know that I love you. You know that I care for you. I'm here. Yeah, I messed up. I'm sorry. But God, I love you." He says, "Feed my sheep. Feed my lambs. Take care of them. Do something. It's not, if you truly love me, now you need to go do something. You need to act on that." And 2 other times this happens, 3 times. Peter denied him 3 times. Jesus restores him 3 times. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Feed my sheep. Peter, do you truly love me more than these? Agreed, Peter. Yes, Jesus, you know I love you. You know I care for you. He says, feed my lambs. Take care of my flock. Be the shepherd. Be the foundation, the rock of the community. And then there's this beautiful line. And after he said this, Jesus said to him, follow me. Right? The call again, after the fallen, after the brokenness, after the hurt, he says, follow me. I love you. I choose you still. Even after all you've done, and even after everywhere you've gone, I choose you still. That's what God says to each one of us. He says, even after you falter, even after you fail, you've had broken relationships, and broken marriages, you've had broken families, you've walked away from me time and time again when I've said, go spread the gospel, go talk to your neighbors, go spread my love, and you've walked away, and still I say, I choose you, follow me. And I will make you fishers of men. God still believes in you, He still loves you, He still cares for you, even after everything that you've done, after every place you've gone that you shouldn't have gone, He still loves you. He still believes in you. Still speaking to you. This is why Peter, in his epistle, can say all the things he does, right? Because he's experienced it. He really knows it. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Do this. Follow me. Get ready to take care of the sheep. Prepare your minds for action. Be sober-minded, because he wasn't. Right? He's the one who cut off the soldier's ear. He was the one who denied Christ. He's the one who experienced it all. And God says, and he reminds people, be sober-minded. Watch what you say, watch what you do. Prepare your minds for action, be sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace to be revealed, to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Get ready, because God's bringing it all. And it's not going to be you, it's not about you, it's about Him. He's going to take care of it, so prepare yourself. Because when God asks you to pray for the little boy with the heart murmur, be prepared for what He's going to do. Because God is great. He is an amazing God. And then he goes on and says, knowing that you were ransomed from your futile ways. That was Peter, ransomed from his futile. He knew he was nothing. He knew he was just a day laborer, a fisherman, an uneducated guy. And he says, but God redeemed me from my futile ways. He brought me to something else. Not that being a fisherman is wrong, not that being a day laborer is wrong, but he says, God was able to use me no matter who I am and what I am doing. Just like he says to you, God can use you no matter where you are or what you're doing. Whether your job is a cashier or your job is a scientist, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or dad or you're a nuclear physicist or a teacher, God can use you in every situation, every place, because He has redeemed you. He's ransomed you. Inherit from your forefathers. That futile way was inherited, the sinful nature that was inherited from your forefathers. And it wasn't with the perishable things like gold or silver, but with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. He laid down His life. He paid the price for you so that you could follow Him. He goes on, right? Having purified your souls by your obedience to the truth for the sincere brotherly love, love one another earnestly from a pure heart. Remember, Jesus says to him, do you love me? Feed, do, go. And he says here the same thing. Love. Just as God loved us, just as He laid down His life for you, just as He restores you, and you make a confession, God, I love you, then love each other earnestly. Do the work of love. Go where I go, say what I say, do what I do. So the question of the witness asks us today, the question that hits home today for us is this: what can you do? Because a lot of times we wonder that, right? What can I do? I'm just a person. I'm too young, too old. I'm just a person. What can I do? If God can use someone like Peter, who's washed out of Hebrew school, who denied him, who was brash and didn't listen, who was a rock and sank like a stone to the bottom of the sea. God can use you. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, He can use you, He can speak through you, He can work through you. What is God asking you to do? Where is He asking you to go? To your neighbor, to your brother, to your sister, to your friend, where is God calling you? What can you do? Because He's called you. He says, I love you. Feed my lambs. Take care of my sheep. Follow me. May you be able to follow Him wherever He leads you. Amen. We continue by worshiping our Lord with our tithes and offerings.